This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. We start the show as we always do with a big thank you to everyone who has subscribed to the podcast and followed us on social media. If you're not already subscribed, we are on all the popular podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. We also have a show page on anchor.com. Just go to that URL, search for the PR Podcast, and you can even click a button and record a message to send to us that we can play on the show. Please do send us your feedback, whether you're clicking that button or whether you're just sending us a direct message or an email, good, bad, or otherwise. We want to use it to create a show that's valuable to you. That's why we're here. So do check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Continue to send your messages and your questions that you want answered on the show. We've got another great guest this week, so let's get right to it. Robert George has one of the most enviable and one of the most challenging jobs in all of journalism. He is an opinion writer, articulating both his own thoughts and the thoughts of the publication that he's writing for. And that can be a real tightrope, and one that often elicits, I'm sure he will agree with me, lots of reader feedback. So Robert's worked for the New York Daily News, the New York Post, and he is the latest addition to the Bloomberg opinion team. Robert always has terrific insights to the things that he writes about, and I absolutely love his style and his perspective. We are also fellow geeks together. We may even get into that. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jody. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about what you do as an opinion writer. What is the role of an opinion writer?
Well, so as you described at the beginning, I've got two hats. As a member of an editorial board, as I have been from the New York Post to the Daily News and now to Bloomberg Opinion, we are writing the opinion of our media entity, whether it's the Post and its publisher Rupert Murdoch, or the Daily News, which went from owner Mort Zuckerman and is now owned as part of the Tribune Publishing family, or now obviously Bloomberg Opinion, which is owned obviously by Michael Bloomberg. We are writing the opinion of the entity, the opinion of the proprietor on a whole host of national issues. On Bloomberg, it's national issues. When it was at the Post, we're writing about local, state, and national pieces. Now, on top of that, I'm also a byline columnist, and that's when I can write something that's a little bit more discreet, has a personal insights, and I can go a little bit further in a personal way than the editorial does. The editorial, again, is the organization's viewpoint on the world and on the world affairs, and the columns are mine. And most of the time they're parallel. I may deviate a little bit one way or the other, but generally speaking, we're all in sync.
Tell us a little bit maybe about I hate the way this question is going to come out, but I'll say it, a little bit about the day-to-day, sort of what goes into creating opinion pieces, whether they are, as you said, your own thoughts as a byline writer, or articulating what the publication that you're writing for is trying to get across. What's the sauce? How do you make the sauce?
Okay, well, what I'll do is, as you said, I'm a new member of the Bloomberg Opinion team, and when I say new, I'm like basically been there for about a week or so.
You still have that new car smell.
Yeah, I got that. Oh, that's what it is. I just thought it was my apartment from working from home, but yes. So what I will do is kind of share because we're sort of getting into the groove of the day-to-day at Bloomberg. So what I will do is kind of share what worked on the last two editorial boards I was at, where there, two tabloids in New York City, the New York Post and the New York Daily News. And what would happen there is you've got between 4 and 6 members of the editorial board, and every morning we'll sit down and take a look at what the issues that are going on locally, state and nationally, and we'll pitch out ideas on saying something about what back then, Michael Bloomberg or Bill de Blasio or Andrew Cuomo or Barack Obama or Donald Trump, what's coming from those governments, and other issues that are germane for our readers, and it's a kind of a give and take, and the editorial page editor will say, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good one. Let's go with that." Or that particular editorial sounds maybe a little bit too close to something we wrote a couple of weeks ago. So let's hold off on that. And we'll sometimes the person who pitches the idea will also then go off and write it. And writing it also quite often engages, entails individual research and reporting. So I have to be making some phone calls to experts in the field and other newsmakers and so forth, and just to get a sense of what the lay of the land is, what the latest developments are from what I had read in the newspaper that morning, or just seen on the TV, to get, because obviously, if something airs as a news item, it may turn out to be that it wasn't quite accurate, and you need to drill down further to get more facts to help craft what our we have a general idea what our opinion is going to be, but we have to make sure that the facts fit what the opinion is, to see that they support the general opinion of the editorial page.
So are the genesis of the topics that you choose to write about, are they always coming from inside your organization, whether it's the Daily News, the Post, or Bloomberg, or while there is external, I'll call inspiration, maybe, like you mentioned, you read something in the paper, obviously something is going on that's an ongoing issue that you're going to weigh in on. Is it always the editorial group that you're working with that's making up its mind on what it wants to write about, or are you ever responding to direct inquiries from a PR person like me or someone else? Are you ever choosing to do that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll get to use your favorite term. We'll get pitches from the outside. Sometimes elected officials will let us know that there's like an important vote that's coming up in City Hall, or some legislation that's going through Congress, and would urge us to weigh in on it, because they will recognize that editorial boards, even in this era where newspapers have been falling by the wayside, they realize that a lot of people read them. A lot of other newsmakers and political and ideological influencers read them, and it can give their particular cause an extra boost. And most definitely, we get pitches from PR types who are representing activists, activist groups of of any persuasion, from left, right, commercial organizations will also. I think let's see which I'm trying to remember which group it was, but there was um, maybe one of the wholesaler groups was really pushing back against the plastic bag ban a couple of years ago. So that particular organization hired a PR group to make sure that their concerns were made known to the editorial board. And quite often, you know this, uh, a group will set up an editorial board meeting. In the before times, that would be, of course, they would come into, they'd come into the office and they would, outline their case and, and urge our support on it.
But drilling down on that, those kind of those, whether they're get to know you meetings, exploratory meetings, research, what have you, how frequently do those types of meetings happen? And from whom do you entertain those types of meetings? Because I think on the PR side of the fence, I'll have conversations with clients all the time, and they'll want to talk to the editorial board. They'll say, well, this is an important issue. We want to educate them on this. We want them to get to know us on this. And in the past, you and I have interacted, and at the various publications that you've been at, I've brought clients in to talk with the editorial board, or the editorial editor, what have you. And they really are kind of educational, get to know you. Here's a topic that you might be interested in, or that's going to come up. It's not necessarily has a fire lit under it, right? Where it's like, okay, legislation is coming up or something like that. It's more exploratory or educational in that way. I'm gathering that those don't happen as frequently as maybe clients think they happen. How frequently do they happen?
On the editorial board, we often we have to manage our own bandwidth in a sense. So there are times where a group or an individual will call us up and ask to come in, and we'll kick it around and say, is this a meeting that's worth our time at this particular moment? So there'll be some times where an organization will come in and it'll just be a one-on-one. I may just sit down with the representative from the group, and they might have a PR, an independent PR person with them, or they may just be there, just their staff, including their in-house communications person. So if the board will have this discussion, say, this isn't quite worth. This doesn't quite rise to the level of having the entire board in the room or on the call. So let's just do the one-on-one. And so, and other times it'll just be can I just I'll ask, send me the information, and then you and I can have a follow-up one-on-one phone call, and you can just clarify it. And then as the issue's salience grows, let's circle back and then bring in the entire group. That happened quite a lot a couple of years ago when what they called the fight for 15 was going on, the increasing the minimum wage in New York to $15 an hour, which a topic which came up in the last presidential debate.
So what kind of issues that aren't that kind of the legislation coming up or something like that? What do pitches, to use the phrase, what do pitches to an editorial board have to include to get your attention, to make you say, oh, we should have either a call with them, or maybe even as much as a full board meeting?
Well, uh, the most important thing is for them, for the person making the pitch, to have a good sense of where the editorial board is on the given issue. Like for example, as I said, I was very fortunate to have worked for the two top tabloids in New York, the New York Post and the Daily News. Both long-standing papers. The front page headlines are very well known, from headless body and topless bar to Ford to New York drop dead. You know, people know these brands, and they know that there's influence. The influence there. They know that the New York Post is a center right publication, more to the conservative side, and the Daily News is center left, centrist. The Daily News, though, also has a kind of a reputation for kind of drilling, being slightly more wonky, to use a phrase, in terms of drilling down into the issues. The New York Post has sort of like a kind of street fighting, punch you in the gut to kind of get your attention, kind of an approach.
I thought the Post more aimed for the nose.
that too. Or sometimes maybe even lower, on the anatomy. Who knows, But so there's a sense of the styles of the paper, but you also want to know if you've got that basic. So you've got that kind of basic philosophy, but it's sometimes it is the case, like while the Daily News is a little bit more, as I said, slightly more center left. There's been much overlap over the years on issues of, say, of law enforcement. Both publications for many years were supportive of the what is now the rather considered really the controversial policy of stop and frisk. The Daily News eventually ended up doing a mea culpa and saying, we were wrong on that. The Post kind of still hung on to its older position. But the point is, if you do your homework, you can figure out a way to make a pitch to those. Well, first of all, you're going to look and say, on minimum wage, I'm going to have a much better shot in terms of getting my point across by going with by going with the Daily News, and realizing it may not even make any sense to go to the Post. On something like the plastic bag, the plastic bag ban. Well, the Post, because it's a free market, writer center kind of thing. I'm going to definitely go there. But the Daily News is very skeptical on regulation, and understands the problems of small businesses and so forth. So I'm going to pitch to both of them and see if I can get favorable editorials. Favorable editorials out of each. So again, you definitely need to do your homework and know the general philosophy, and then figure out, if I know the general philosophy of this editorial board, how do I translate it to make it sound attractive, to make my cause attractive to their ideology, and know that they'll give me a fair hearing.
Yeah, I would think that, at least my view is, that editorial board pitching and trying to get an editorial piece in any paper, I think, is really high stakes, because the angle that you pitch, the story that you pitch, the facts that you pitch aren't necessarily immediately endorsed by the editorial board writers, right? And that's their job. Their job is to assess what you're telling them and to see if it passes their smell test and to weigh in and give their opinion on what you're saying. It's the exact opposite, I think, of the front of the paper, right?
Well, it depends.
It's not I guess what I mean, it's not reporting in the sense that, Jody said this or X organization said this, and therefore I am reporting this. It's they
Right.
said this, and here's what we think of it. It's got a
Yeah.
little different spin.
Yeah. No, that's exactly. No, that's right. Now, keep in mind that well, first of all, at one point in the history of journalism, there was almost a great wall between the news side, or what we would say the front of the paper, the front of the paper, and the editorial page. Uh, and in fact, if I wanted to go into the full history of journalism, I would say, going back more than 100 years, initially there wasn't really that much of a difference, and then somewhere in the early to mid 20th century, you ended up getting this more of a distance between how a story was being presented on the front page and how the editorial page would opine on that. If you go overseas, particularly if you go to the UK, for example, there's much more of a through line in terms of worldview in a newspaper in say the UK than you'll find over here. Like, for example, if you're in the UK, you know full well that the Daily Mail and the Sun and the Telegraph are to the right. The Independent and the Guardian are clearly to the left, and you know that from how the stories are presented on the front page all the way through to the editorial page. It's a little bit more nuanced. It's a little bit more nuanced in the United States, even though, as I said, the New York Post is a right of center paper, partly because Rupert Murdoch sort of grew up on that Australian and British way of presenting the news. The Daily News has, I think, as the years have gone by, the difference between there's less of a difference between how things are presented on the front page and how things are come across on the editorial board. But I would also say, my personal observation, I think that actually is more true in newspapers today than it might have been a few decades ago. I mean, I think people realize that the New York Times is, even though it's considered the paper of record, it is a centrist paper, but it is a more, in my viewpoint, it's more to the left, not far left, but I think it is a center left publication, both in the way the news is presented and obviously on its editorial board as well. And that's completely. I have no. You know this, but just to give your listeners a little bit of background, I was born in Trinidad, in the West Indies. My mom and I moved to England when I was a year old, and then we moved to the States. We moved to the States when I was about 8. So I've always had an interest in reading newspapers and listening to the news and so forth. So it's both my career, but it's also been my vocation and my kind of hobby as well. So knowing how publications have been put together around the rest of the world, I actually kind of think, it might actually help U.S. journalism, American journalism, if things were more out in the open. If we knew that X publication over here is a professional, well-written, well-researched publication, but its viewpoint is more to the left. And over here is a publication that it's well written, well researched. They dig up stories and so forth. But its worldview is more to the right, and let the public know that, and there's nothing wrong with that, because I think the public is ultimately smart enough to sift through that, recognize that there is an inherent bias there, but this paper over here is digging up a story or emphasizing a story that I hadn't seen before, and this one is doing it over here. And they're both writing on the same story, but they're emphasizing A, and this one emphasizing B. And let's try and figure out what the differences are.
Well, and that's a terrific segue into something that I wanted to talk with you about, and I think something that has personally bothered me the last 4 years, the rise of this concept of fake news, and it means lots of different things to lots of different people. I wanted to get your take on sort of this concept of fake news, kind of what it means, what it is, what it isn't, and especially from I think from an editorial and an opinion writer, I think your perspective would be unique in sort of what is it, why is it, and is it good, is it bad, what place does it have? I mean, is it real? What does fake news mean to you?
Well, now again, I'm an opinion journalist, and I will candidly say, but I'll give you to give you a little bit more of my professional background. My first big time, my first big boy pants job professionally was in politics in D.C., and I worked for the Republican National Committee. Then went to work on Capitol Hill for a couple of Republican members of Congress, including then Speaker Newt Gingrich. Came back to the RNC before coming to New York and working at the Post and so forth. So my personal political sensibilities lean slightly to the right. I still think of myself as a Republican. I'm not a fan of the current president. And I think one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of the current president is his desire to sow distrust. Again, this is purely my viewpoint here. It's certainly not the Bloomberg opinion. It's Robert George's opinion. So sowing distrust in not just news, but from what I see as objective sources of information, or I should say institutions that strive to be objective sources of information. That includes media entities, academia, the scientific world, and so forth. I think there's a politicization that the president engages in that sows so much distrust that it makes it difficult for the average person at home to figure out, okay, what's real. And I think when you have a huge emergency such as a pandemic, that can have very problematic consequences. So to a certain extent, I say that because to a certain extent, I think the president has used the phrase fake news to, and in fact, I think he admitted this in either, if not the current Bob Woodward book, maybe one previous to that, where he says that he calls entities fake news. So when they come out with a story that is negative and has facts, the facts to support it, his supporters will be dismissive of it, because he, in a sense, has kind of poisoned the well against any negative stories that are coming his way. Now, to say that, let me put in a major caveat there. The news media, whether it's print or whether it's online or television, has not been perfect. And I think there's been sloppy journalism over the last few years, partly maybe as a reaction, because I think there's been a lot of wrongdoing with this current administration. And I think there's been such a sort of a sloppy, we have to get this guy. We have to kind of get this guy. And there's sometimes a rush to publish when it would be better to hold off to make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed. Because if a mistake does come up and a news organization has to admit that they got it wrong, that gives more ammunition to the person who wanted to undermine the media and undermine the value of the press in the first place. So the pressure on the press to it's never been more important for press organizations to get the story right. Even the smallest mistake allows us to become incredibly vulnerable to those who want to dismiss us, dismiss us in the first place. I will say, in the closing days of this current campaign, it is rather amusing to see the president get very, very irritated that the press is not all following the New York Post's semi-scoop on the Hunter Biden laptop, because there's large questioning of the provenance of this laptop, where it came from, what the chain of custody was. There is this question about whether it's part of yet another Russian election interference op, and it's funny to see the president yelling at all of these organizations that for the last 4 years he's been calling fake news, and their reluctance to publish something that their editorial instincts tell them is literally fake news. And so now the shoes on the other foot.
Yeah, it is interesting there. I like the way that you and comments absent of political persuasion here. Let's just put that whole thing on it. I like the way you zone it. You keyed in on the concept of sowing distrust, because I feel like the current definition of fake news is disagreeing and disavowing anything that you don't agree with, regardless of its background, its factual accuracy, the research that has gone into it. And you talked about doing research for opinion pieces. All reporters and all journalists do a varying degree of research depending on what is required of that piece that they're writing. And so I think you're absolutely right, and I agree with you about how this concept of fake news has been this desire to sow distrust in the organizations that task themselves with delivering factual information, even if it is on the opinion page versus the front of the paper. It's still factual information, simply because it doesn't fit your narrative. And I think that's a troubling thing for a democracy writ large. And we've got to be able to agree on what are facts, if we're ever going to advance the agendas, whether they are right, left, center, what have you. We've got to be able to agree on facts. And it's a good segue, I think, into the last thing that I wanted to talk with you. And you started to touch on this a little bit too. Do you think that reporters and news outlets are doing a good job of covering politics, as challenging as it is to cover politics right now, with all the accusations of well, this is fake media or this is fake news, and I don't disagree with that. And there are legitimate, oopses on the part of media organizations in that what you talked about, and I've seen it too. Sort of this rush to get a story out there, and maybe there are corrections that need to get made, or they have to backtrack over certain things. But by and large, I think media organizations are doing a good job of fact checking their pieces. Or do you think that news outlets are doing a good job? And what do you think might need to change either in the waning days of this campaign or even going into the next 4 years, whether it's the current administration getting another 4 years or a new administration?
One of the biggest challenges we're facing right now is that um, uh, Americans are self-selecting their own news, and unlike the example unlike the example I mentioned before about, say, over in the UK, where people would take a selection of, oh, one day I'll pick up the Guardian on the left, and one day I'll pick up the Daily Mail on the right, and I'll figure out what's going on. We now have a situation where because of the red state blue state phenomenon, where some people are just going to swear completely by Fox News. Some people are going to completely swear by MSNBC, and CNN is somewhere in the middle there. They go online, and they'll if you're far right, you'll read the opinion site, Gateway Pundit, just to throw it out there. If you're on the left, you might be looking, at Daily Kos, and your priors are supported, and you're not really looking you're not necessarily looking to be challenged by a contrary narrative. We saw this in the debate, where the president, who it is reported watches lots and lots of television, and most of it is apparently set to Fox News, and so he was spouting out statements and comments, and making references that a lot of Americans might not have any idea of what he's talking about, because it was coming from one specific news source only. Prior presidents, you and I are old enough to remember when the news was basically three networks, and then four when Fox, the broadcasting network, came along. But you had kind of three networks, and kind of that was it. We now have it's so much vaster, but this is a case where more sources does not necessarily mean more trusted information. In fact, quite the opposite. So yeah, it's a major challenge if you're working for a New York Times or for a Washington Post, or even for a New York Daily News. You have to work damn hard to make sure your facts are right, and then present, recognizing that people's time spans have shrunk. So you have to figure out a way to pack in the most facts, the most information, but in a tight frame where you can get that and hope that they've been informed. And then obviously, if you're writing on from the opinion side, present it in a way that get the opinion across, get the point across, make them understand why this is important, and convince them to either vote the way that you would like them to vote, or to make them understand why they should support a specific opinion. It's very, very hard. It's much harder than it was, even 20 years ago, and certainly, harder than 30 or 40 years ago, when there was a general acceptance of the facts truly are. Everybody would say, "Oh, okay, well, this headline, this big story that's in the Daily News, or this story that's in the New York Times is, oh yeah, yeah, I believe the basic facts from that, and now here's an informed opinion on how I should interpret those, how I should act given those facts." But unfortunately, we're right now in a time where people don't even agree what the actual facts are.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I feel like we have generally lost our way when it comes to that, general agreement on facts and what are facts, and things as simple as, the sky is blue or things like that. I mean, something it's, you wonder how people get to that place, and how we've all got to that place where we actually disagree on something as generally accepted as the sky is blue. You've given us a lot to think about here, Robert, and appreciate it. We're going to end up the podcast here by stealing a page from the Inside the Actor Studio show, which is one that I loved. And we're going to start asking our guests as we close out each episode of the podcast, a series of rapid fire questions here. These are just meant to elicit a simple answer, maybe a laugh or two, but to also give us a little insight into our guests. So with your indulgence, Robert, let's begin.
All right.
Favorite news source?
That is tough. I like, and this is because I'm not just a news junkie, but I'm a political news junkie. One of the first sites that I fire up in the morning is a website called Political Wire. It's a guy by the name of Tagan Goddard. Has had it up for it might be close to 20 years now. He was one of the original bloggers in like the mid 2000s, and it's been up and running. It's got a very clean interface. In my view, his particular perspective, because he sometimes the way it's laid out is what the big political stories are of the day, whether it's polling, or whether it's a statement from a particular politician, or something, what's going on Capitol Hill, something that's coming out of the White House, and he will every now and then he'll have a special what could be considered a mini editorial in his voice in between. So the readership, because there's comment section as well. The readership skews more to the left, and Tagan skews more to the left. But he also has a long list of headlines from other sites, linking to Politico and the Times and the Washington Post and so forth. So it has some similarities to the classic Drudge outlook, the classic Drudge outlook, but it's much cleaner. So that's kind of where I start, and then I run through all of my New York papers. I fire up my iPad and look at the Times, look at the Daily News, look at the Post, and the New York Post and then Washington Post as well. So I'm a traditionalist.
All right. Next rapid fire question: Twitter or LinkedIn?
I think you know me. You know me. I'm a Twitter fiend. Some would call me a Twitter slut, or a Twitter tramp. I guess Twitter tramp is the most alliterative, right? Yeah, I'm very much a Twitter. I'm very much a Twitter person. I do always have to remember that even though I'm tweeting in my own voice, people do know where I work from. I mean, it's in my bio and so forth. So I also realize that I don't want to do something that's going to reflect poorly on the institution to which I'm working for. So, but yeah, I tell people, come for the analysis, stay for the puns, or come for the puns and stay for the analysis.
I love the puns. Love the
Yeah,
puns on Twitter.
thank you.
All right.
I am on LinkedIn, but Twitter is definitely my default. Yeah.
Next rapid fire question: coffee or alcohol?
Yes.
Good one. Favorite eat while working food?
Oh gosh, it's these. What do you call them? It's kind of the trail mix stuff. It's a mixture of fruit and chocolate and it's basically, I think they call them Power Up or Omega 3. Anyway, one of those. It's a mixture. It's a mixture of grains and fruit and chocolate and stuff like that. That's
health, not you.
Yeah, that's that.
All right. Final rapid fire question: what do you want to be after you finish this career?
Alive.
I think a lot of people in journalism might agree with you,
By the way,
I certainly do too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me. By the way, since given this is a PR podcast, I can't go. I have to tell you this quick anecdote here, because somebody once asked me, what's the worst pitch you ever got, and I didn't really have an answer to them. But finally, somebody gave me something that I can make this answer right now. So this was probably about 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago. Somebody, a woman, emailed me, and this was a blind pitch, saying, "Oh, this is like, dear Robert, blah blah blah." And this is somebody who doesn't know me, but my name has popped up, and so they send me the blind email. It says, "Dear Robert, these are challenging times for news organizations. Over the last few years, X number of newspapers have closed. Others have had these mass layoffs. I would like to introduce you to Dr. So and so, or Professor so and so, who has written on this topic about news organizations shrinking and the implications that it has for the society and public. Can I put you in touch with this person?" So this person, this PR person, sends this email to to a member of the editorial board of an organization that 2 years before had seen half of its newsroom laid off. So it was just a kind of a cluelessness that is stunning in its. There was not even a line in there saying, "Well, I know you're facing these challenges at the news," or something like that. I'm thinking, why would you want to pitch an academic to an editorial board which doesn't really need an academic viewpoint to know that the news organizations are imperiled, and we had just been at that time taken over by this new corporate entity that had a history of closing down organizations and things like that. So I was just, and then by the way, so this, I just ignored the editor, the email, as you get so many pitches, you don't always respond to all of them. But this person then emails me back about a week later, just following up. Would you like to see? And then finally, I just emailed and said, you might want to do a little bit of research before you send an email like this, because you're kind of showing a certain ignorance. You're not quite, as the kids say, reading the room.
I was gonna say, you could have politely responded that you probably know more firsthand about the topic than the academic that she was pitching.
Oh, no, that's exactly right. But so yeah, as and you know this, and I'm sure you told your colleagues this. Do your homework, because that'll be there's one way. If you don't know who you're writing to, there's one way. That's one way to make sure that. One way to make sure that your pitch is not going to be heard, and whoever you're representing is getting poor representation.
Well, Robert, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for spending so much time and lending such great insight into what you do. Please let people know. We already talked about it a little bit, but let people know how they can find you online.
I'm on Twitter at Rob George. And you'll, as I said, come for the puns, stay for the analysis, or vice versa.
They are brilliant. Well, thanks again, and thanks everyone for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show and connect with us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram at the PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.